Hey guys, Nandra here, and welcome to my video on salt, tilt, and what to do about these things. Now, for those of you who don't know, salt and tilt are categorized by when you lose a bunch of games in a row, or when you get that feeling of extreme unpleasantness and just overall just being strongly upset about certain situations, both in your life and in things that you do, that cause you to get very, very frustrated, such as for example, in the context of this video, such as losing a bunch of games on ladder, or facing the same decks, or basically just about anything under the sun. And an important thing to recognize about salt is that salt is A, not healthy, and then B, that it's both avoidable, and that you need to recognize the early warning signs before it gets too ridiculous, and before you kind of hit that tipping point of where you're too salty to listen to reason, and you're just compounding the problem and just making it incredibly worse. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the ways that you can get salty is if you can lose a lot of games in a row, especially to the same deck. And something they have to realize is that on places like ladder and whatnot, you're generally going to typically see whatever the perceived best deck is, and you're gonna have to make peace with that, because everyone like you wants to win, and winning is subjective. It's not determined solely by what you like to play. It's so much as it is other factors involved, such as what's the best deck to climb with. Because if you're playing on ladder, you want points. Everyone wants points. It's part of the reason why you play ladder. So that's one of those things that you're gonna have to make your individual peace with. However, sometimes when you play versus the same decks and you keep losing to them, you can get frustrated because there's a certain sense of monotony involved, and you might not be recognizing what you might be doing wrong, if anything at all, because obviously, if a deck is the best deck, it's called the best deck for a reason, and however, this is a double-edged sword. It's because obviously, if it's the best deck, then sometimes it has weaknesses that you can exploit, as well as it's generally going to be the deck with the target on its back, and provided you can make a counter to that deck, that you can usually kind of play that deck, and usually if it's new enough, people aren't going to know how to play against it. You can kind of use that to get some free wins. But we have to recognize, okay, well, why is my deck losing? Am I losing to high rolls? Am I losing to the overall consistency of his deck? Do I need to maybe switch decks? For me, a general rule of thumb is if I lose 3 games back to back, then I go ahead and I make edits to my deck, because generally, sometimes we include things in our deck that aren't actually that good, or sometimes we try to force synergies that don't actually exist, or just sometimes maybe your curve is a little bit too high, or maybe it's a little bit too low, or something like that in between. Because obviously, as you play, you're gonna want to make semi-constant edits to your deck until you get a good, really nice finished product. And it's important to just kind of take a break every 3 or 4 games, and just kind of watch your replays, double check that, oh, well, maybe I misplayed here one turn, or maybe I could have done this, or maybe I should have predicted for him to do something like this. Because a lot of times when you lose, it's going to be when you lose a game, it's going to be one of three or four factors, or it's going to be because of one of three or four different root causes. For example, one reason that you might lose a game is because oh, he had a better deck than me, or oh, maybe maybe I had bad draws, or oh, maybe I just or maybe I just misplayed one or two turns, because yes, one or two misplays can cost you games. Or just lastly, and this one is important, maybe I just lost to a bad beat. Recognizing a bad beat is important because, well, actually, first I'll go ahead and talk about what a bad beat is. A bad beat is when you lose a game in one of those certain scenarios where you lose to something insanely high rolly. Like for example, maybe his tribunal 1 and 4 sniped your best creature and you didn't have lethal anymore, or maybe your opponent got the best possible curve they could have humanly gotten. Like for example, right now neutral sword is pretty popular. So for example, a good high roll from them would be from to have exactly turn 1 to 6 on curve play, and the best possible play too. So for example, with neutral sword, turn 1 goblin, turn 2 play, turn 3 Grimnir, turn 4 Alice, turn 4 Council of Card Knights, turn 6 Alwidas. And then he was going first on top of that in order to compound his advantage and just snowball you out of the game. And bad beats do happen, and it's important to just kind of keep that in mind, because you're not meant to win every single game. That's not how card games work. There are going to be games in which you just like in which you just lose. Not necessarily because you're a bad player or anything like that, just because sometimes that game just wasn't in the cards for you, pun intended. The other important thing is that when you are salty, that you need to recognize, okay, well, I'm already salty. What can I do about this? For example, one thing you can do when you're salty: stop playing the game. Stop giving power to whatever is making you salty in the first place. If you're salty about ladder, maybe you should go ahead and try some unranked for a little bit, and maybe see if that helps your mood out. Because a big thing that I see people say all the time when they get salty, and I tell them to take a break, is, well, but what about my points? I want to climb. And this is just simply not true, because it's been scientifically proven that when you get upset, when you get angry, you temporarily lose IQ, and it becomes a vicious cycle in which you make worse plays overall because you're tilted, and you keep losing games because you're making worse plays, and that just like furthers your tilt, and it's just like an endless loop. And another important part is that while yes, you can't while yes, if you stop playing and you take a break to recover from your tilt, yes, you can't climb. However, you also won't lose points either, and this part is important. Shadowverse is not like, say, Hearthstone, in that you can lose a bunch of points but also recover a bunch of points in the same day, because because there's a fixed cap on exactly how many points per win that you can get. So if you tilt and you lose like 4,000 plus points in the same day, that's a lot of games you have to win semi consecutively in order to recover all those points. Like on average, that's at least 60 more games you have to play in order to recover that, and you have to have at least a 50% win rate in order to recover those points. That's a lot of games, and you might not have the time to do that. Whereas if you take a break and you only use like 500 games or sorry, you only not 500 games, you only use like 500 points before realizing that, okay, I'm salty and need to take a break. Five wins is not that hard to get. Whereas at least not compared to like, say, 50 plus. The last major thing that you want to do when you get salty is you need to find someone to talk to and then talk to them. Salt is something that I guarantee you everyone in this game understands because we've all been there. We've all had those times where opponent like went like turn 4 Daria into turn 5 Daria into turn 6 Daria and then had all the burn spells possible and we just like lose the game off of it. We've all had those times in which it felt like the Haven player had like every single answer humanly possible, or the ramp player had all the ramp humanly possible, or just like sitting at like 10 PP at like turn 4 or something like that. Yeah, we've all been there. So because we've all been there, we can all like relate to this, and that's really important, I think. For me personally, I'm genuinely always willing to help out people when they're tilted. So if you find me on YouTube, if you find me on Twitch, if you find me anywhere, and you just like say, hey, I need a little help, I'm tilted, what can I do about this? I will always be willing to help you because you never know when you might be that person who one day you might need a little bit of help of your own. So really pays to be there for others so that later in the future they can be there for you. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to say today. Just, trying to avoid tilt whenever possible, trying to avoid staying salty about a game, because at the end of the day, you need to remember this is just a game. It doesn't actually determine anything in your actual life. Just it's just basically like a hobby, something you do for fun, and it's important that you keep your hobbies actual fun and you don't actually treat them like chores or like work because that's how you go ahead and you turn something unfun. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and go ahead and leave me your thoughts on what you do about salt and tilt down in the comments below. And I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.